California MUFON Radio, Lorien Fenton.
Welcome, everyone, to the California MUFON Radio Show. I'm your host, Lorien Fenton. We're here on Inception Radio Network, the home of the most amazing app on the planet. And we're also replayed over at Late Night in the Midlands with Michael Vara. And I'm not sure where else we're being replayed at this point, folks, but I do know there are several other networks out there replaying the show, which I'm very thankful for IRN letting them do so. And thankful to all the people who are trying to get the truth out there, as we all know it. So there you are. So I hope you guys had a great week or two. I haven't been here for a while, and then when I did show up was it last week, MJ? I don't remember what it was. I swear to God, folks, I had the wildest thing happen, and it's so funny. And my guest, my last guest on the show, last week I was really sick. I think it was last week. So many things have been going on. I can't even think about it anymore. But the Russell Scott Breiniger, he sent me his books, Overlords of the Singularity. Oh my God, you guys! I thought it was the phone book. I swear to God, I see this big package at the door, and I'm like, oh God, what is that? And I come home, and there's this thing the size of a freaking phone book on my desk, and it's his book, and I can't wait to dig into it. I don't know when I will have time to read the whole thing. I mean, it's literally 4 inches thick, and so we'll figure it out. But man, he was a great guest, and I got to tell you guys what happened. I told this, I'm on a new network too. I'm over at KCOR on Monday evenings from 8 to 10 p.m. Pacific, just so you guys are aware. So if you want to catch more of the Fenton, the Fenton truth, as we're starting to call it, then you guys head on over there and listen to me on Monday nights as well. So I'd love to have you, show up everywhere I'm at. Why not? It's a party. What can I say? Anyhow, so the last time I was live on air, Russell was on the show, Breiniger, and I made it all the way. Here's what happens. When the show started, and they're sitting right here on my desk. I'm looking at them. I was getting over the cold and getting it again and going through this whole thing. And I bought a bunch of coldies, and I never have taken coldies before, but they're these zinc lozenges that you take, kind of like Zicam. And there's pink ones and there's blue ones. And I was sitting here, and I really hadn't read the label. I hadn't done anything. I just threw them all on my desk. And when the show started, I kind of, I'm sitting there, doing my thing. I put the lozenge in my mouth, and I'm sucking it down, and, a whole bit. And then an hour later, not supposed to take them except for like every hour or two. I was kind of pushing it because I wasn't feeling well. I was having coughing attacks and the whole bit. And I thought, I'll just take another one. So then it was 9 o'clock. I took one at 9 o'clock. And then I'm sitting here, I'm doing the show, listening to Russell. I look at the clock, and I know we got like 4 or 3 minutes left in the show. And I think, oh God, I'm getting so tired. I wonder what's going on. I'll just listen to him. I'll close my eyes and I'll listen to him for a second. The next thing I know, I startle awake. I put my hand down on the keyboard. Somehow I muted or disconnected from the network. I'm not sure what happened. But I probably was asleep for maybe a minute and a half. I don't know. But I do remember hearing his voice the whole time. So I don't know if it was how much it was, folks. Maybe a minute or two. I don't know. But all I know is when I woke up, I'm like, oh my God, what happened? And I'm like, and I hit the keyboard, and then everything went awry. And then I'm trying to talk to the network. They obviously can't hear me. And then I'm like trying to figure out what I did. And I think I unmuted at that point. And so they're like, oh, it's okay. And Russell just stopped talking. So what I did, I felt so bad. This has never happened to me before. I was like, oh my God, what have I done? And I felt so terrible. So the next day, I recorded an end to the show, and I sent it off to Joe, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Anyhow, it was just, it was so crazy, folks. So I got to warn you. There is valerian. There's a whole bunch of sleepy aid products in this Coldies, and it's blue, which means night, and you think I would have figured that out, but I wasn't paying any attention, of course. And so just, if you're on radio, folks, don't start taking NyQuil, things like that when you're trying to do a live radio broadcast, because it certainly isn't going to help you any. Anyhow, so that's what happens. If you guys are wondering why the abrupt end of the show last week, and if I don't know if Joe ever got that recording put on the end, but anyhow, I hope you guys were like, oh my God, she just got knocked off the air. So there you are. Okay, so we're not perfect here at California MUFON Radio, by far from it. Anyhow, so I'm not taking these until the show is over tonight. I will not be chewing on them. I will not be swallowing them. Nothing's going to come of these little things here on the desk, and I'm gonna click them together so you guys know I really have them. Anyhow, so I usually talk a lot longer this evening, and I was going to talk a little bit about some other subjects that have come up this last week for me, but I have Grant Cameron on with me tonight, so I just want to talk briefly about, you guys, as you all know, I have a real hard time with the whole Tom DeLonge thing. When it first came down the pike, I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And as a person who's been in the community for, quite some time now, I've been active in the community only since 2010, 11-ish, but I've been a ufology person. I'm not a major researcher by any stretch of the imagination. But I do know how to go to the library, and I do know how to do research because of other parts of my life. And I don't rely on YouTube as my research, which is really making me insane. That's the one thing that's going on out there right now, folks. Real researchers know how to get a hold of people, how to get information, how to take that information, put it all together, and build the pieces of the puzzle into a clear picture so we can understand what's going on within whatever community you're involved in. And that's what a real researcher does. That's what an investigative journalist does. That's what an author who's trying to give you information that is poignant, to the point, well-researched, has a beginning and a middle and an end, and they're trying to give you something that makes sense and has a conclusion. Oh my God, if I told you guys how many bad books I've read in the last 5 years where there's no reason for them to have written the book in the first place, nothing's researched, no footnotes, I have no idea where anything came from, I have no idea where their sources are, I have no idea why they're even writing these books. And that just makes me go insane. I mean, literally go nuts. I can't handle it. And I'm the first one to say, hey, I don't know the answer to something, so I'm going to sit back and I'm going to just take in the information, and I'm going to sit here, and if it takes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years for me to hear the next person say the same thing, and then if it takes another 5 years, 10 years, whatever, I don't open my mouth about anything until 3 people have told me the same thing. And the 3 people have to not know each other, have to live in different parts of the world or the country at least. They have to be different ages. They have to have a completely different background. They have to be so far removed from each other that they can't contaminate each other's story. I wouldn't take 3 stories from 3 people that go to UFO conferences all together and see each other and know their names from each other. I would just have to take that as, well, one of them told the story, maybe the other one dreamed that, you just don't know. Once it's contaminated like that, you can't use it. And I just get so upset with these people who just take, all these stories at face value, run with them, and then we're sitting here going, what? Now, having said that, I have to apologize to all of you because I do that on my show here. What I do is I bring on people who have amazing stories, and I can't verify if any of them are true or not. All I can tell you is that I bring them on because I want you to get this information, get the same amount of information, hear their stories just like I do wherever I go, whatever I'm doing, so that, 5 years from now, you guys can say, geez, didn't I hear that on Lorien's show? Didn't she have this guy that was a contactee that said he saw, this robot at the foot of the bed? Hey, I have a friend who just saw something like that, or, whatever. That's why I bring them on. And that was my whole point to this, besides the fact that Grant Cameron is probably one of the best researchers out there right now. He actually knows his stuff. He knows what he's doing, and he does the real work. And there's a few others out there that are still doing amazing work. But, you guys, it's really hard to come by people like Grant. They don't exist anymore. Everybody's relying on YouTube and the internet for their research, and it's just not the same. Anyhow, what I'm trying to say here is I do bring on people that I cannot verify their story. I can't tell you guys if any of it's real. I just find it fascinating to get as many stories out there as I can on this show. And it's fascinating to me the amount of different types of stories that the UFOs and the aliens are creating within humanity. I mean, you guys, if you listen to all these people over the years I've been on this network and the different type of people I brought on and the amount of different stories that come up, it's mind-boggling. I mean, I can go another 10 years and we'd probably never have the same type of story twice. I mean, it's really mind-boggling how complex, how different, how shaped to each person's experience, and just how their consciousness interacts with these contacts or abductions or whatever you want to call them, how they all play it out for each person. They play out for each person very differently. And I can't judge their experience. I can't sit here and say, oh, it didn't happen, or give me proof, or, maybe you better do more research, or, I can't do that. All I can do is listen, let them say what happened. It's kind of like my sister, the one that speaks with me still. She thought it was pretty funny. I mentioned something to her about this last Christmas, and she goes, yeah, you're like a priest in a confessional. I was like, God, yeah, that really is it. People come in, they get to unburden themselves, and then they get to, do the 2 hours of penance on the radio show, and then they feel better. It's pretty wild. So, anyhow, but it's likened to that. It's like, people come on my show a lot. They'll come on once, and then you'll never hear them again. You know why? Because they have to tell their story, and someone actually let them talk about it. That's 90% of the battle. As I say here on the show, this is the last part of what I'm going to say tonight. You guys got to get to your MUFON meetings. This is why I do this show. This is why it happens. This is what I'm all about, is that you guys get to these meetings and you find each other and you tell each other what's going on with you. Eventually we're going to come across, the answer on how and why this is all happening. I think Grant is getting very close. I think the people in South America with the Zendras are getting very close. And that's been going on for some time. And Grant and I will talk about that a little bit here at the beginning of the show. But anyhow, there's just, the answers are coming, folks. I know they are. I know, because there's just way too many of us putting the stories of what's happened to each one of us, and they're very different. My contact is not anybody else's contact, I can tell you that. And the things I've seen, I've only run across in all the time I've been doing this, 4 or 5 other people have had anything close to my experiences. So, not to say they're special or anything special. They're just different. They're different for all of us, and that's the whole point of it. Anyhow, so I need you guys to get to those MUFON meetings. It's really, really important. You guys have got to talk about this. It's got to come out in the open. They told me, these aliens or angels or whatever I'm dealing with. So the only reason I'm on the air has nothing to do with me, that's for darn sure, or I would have been making money hand over fist doing this. It's all about you guys. It's about who's hearing my voice and understanding what I'm trying to tell you, that you guys have got to get out there and tell your stories. And if you've never had had contact and you're so interested into this subject, you've got to start asking yourself why you're so interested in the subject. Because the deeper down the rabbit hole I go, I find there's nobody interested in this subject that isn't having something extraordinary happening to them at some level. So just remember that, okay? That's one of the things that I'm really finding out. The deeper I go, we're all having some kind of contact, or we all wouldn't be listening to this show. We wouldn't be listening to the network. We wouldn't be listening to, Coast. We wouldn't be listening to Art Bell. We would never have got involved in any of this if there wasn't a reason for it. And there's some kind of entity or angel or reptilian or gray or something back there behind all this, because there's no reason for you guys to even think about this. So think about that. Why do you even think about it? Unless it's in your consciousness, unless there's something there driving you on, okay? Or maybe it's just that you're aware of it on a spiritual level, and you just need to have other people that are aware of it too. It could be that simple. But whatever it is, get to those MUFON meetings. It's super, super important. It's the most important thing that I do on this network all week and all my shows is tell you guys, get to the meetings, find each other, and get out there and spread the word that this is real. And we're going to eventually get to the point where we're going to be able to make contact with them in the open, and some type of disclosure is going to happen. I'm not sure what it is, and Grant and I will talk about that in just a moment, but something's going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner than later. I definitely guarantee you guys that. Anyhow, okay, that's enough for this evening on anything I've got to say. Grant, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Thanks for the kind words. You're
welcome.
Do I send the check to the same place I sent the last one?
Well, that would be nice, I'll tell you. But, the thing is, Grant, I'm getting more disgusted in my old age with everybody in the community. I hate to say it, but you're one of the few people left standing that I even want to talk to.
I know where you're coming from. I
know. It's like, and what really bothers me is I'm starting to think a lot of them are making stuff up now and lying. I really am. Yeah. If you're year after year on that stage with a new book in hand, where's this information coming from? That's what I want to know. Yeah. So anyhow, well, let's get on to what we're here for tonight. And we got a lot of things to cover. Let's start with disclosure and Tom DeLonge. Let's start with that whole thing. Now, I don't know if many of you have followed this, but Tom DeLonge has announced that he is going to be Mr. Disclosure, but he's also announced quite a few other things that came along with To the Stars Academy, if I remember correctly how to pronounce it. And I don't know how many of you have followed it, but Grant, can you tell people in a nutshell what Tom DeLonge did at that press conference they held and what you took away from that press conference? Let's just start there.
Okay. I guess we should actually go to the most important part, and that is how it all got set up. Because Tom is putting it out like he's the sort of the big maestro, and he's running the whole show, and people have to know, and I keep pointing this out, but nobody really listens, is the fact that he was set up, that he was invited to a barbecue at Lockheed Skunk Works to introduce the president. And he said, okay, I'll do it, but if I do, I need to talk to the president for 5 minutes. And so they bring him in, and this is a setup. This is the hook. This is what they always do. They bring him in. They know he's interested in UFOs. They know he has this major conspiracy website where he's putting stuff on that he knows that isn't really true. They know the whole background on him. And so he has this 5-minute conversation with the president. He doesn't really say anything. He doesn't use the word, I should say. But he says, I've got a proposition, I got a plan. And the guy says, yeah, okay. And so they allow him to come up to Area 51 to Lockheed. He goes into this secure facility. And he's talking to the head scientist and one other guy. The head guy isn't there yet. And he basically goes through his spiel about, how the evil aliens are here and the cargo cult, and that's where religions come from, and that all religions are caused by UFO sightings, and the religions are fighting with each other because aliens are pitting one religion against another. And that's his basic theory. So he puts this out, and then they confront him about his website, his conspiracy website. And he's trying to defend why he had this website about all these, things that he had on there. And the head guy comes in, and they basically, once he finishes the cargo cult, they basically say, we've got someone we want you to meet. And he is sent to Washington, D.C., and he encounters two people from the CIA, and those two guys send him to NASA. He meets with somebody at NASA. That guy sends him to the West Coast to a NASA facility there. He meets a general, and they basically set up this whole thing. So he goes from person to person, and this whole team of people are set up who are going to help him on his mission. And his mission is to disclose and to sell lots of books and make movies and make lots of money at this whole thing. So that's basically. Grant,
I want to interject one thing. What people don't understand is that the history of what's happened in ufology is very important about what Grant's talking about right now, because the same thing happened with the Rockefeller Initiative when Linda Moulton Howe, Stephen Greer, the list goes on and on. I can't remember all the names of all the people there, met with David Rockefeller back in, was it 92? Well, I can't remember what year it was.
Yeah, Lawrence Rockefeller,
Lawrence Rockefeller. Maybe it was 70-something. I just can't remember for the life of me what year that happened, but I see the picture plainly in my head that they took of the group photo. Yeah. And there is everybody in ufology was there at the time, and they all became anointed as the people in ufology that were going to carry forward with we're going to disclose, this is, they were now the gurus of our community. And we didn't vote him in. But anyhow, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, this has been going on.
A repeat,
Yeah, it's happened many times. It happened first with Bill Moore back in.
That's true.
He put out the Roswell book, the Roswell incident. That was before anybody knew Roswell existed. He puts out the Roswell incident, and he's contacted the same thing. The hook there was he gets a phone call from Albuquerque, New Mexico, after he starts the book tour, and it's after the show. There's a phone call comes in at the end of the show. He takes it off air, and it says, "You're the only guy who knows what you're talking about." And Bill Moore was a very smart guy, but he had a big ego, and he basically said, "Yeah, that's true." He basically, I'm the only guy who knows what I'm talking about. And then he continues the book tour, and he gets a phone call from a guy who I've actually identified now. He was a guy who was.
Really?
Everybody always talks about this Falcon thing. The guy he phoned from Offutt Air Force Base, and he was, which was called Richard Doty's defense intelligence guy in Washington, D.C. And I think Brad Sparks identified who this guy was. He was a former, or he was he was an Office of Navy and
Naval Intelligence.
Naval Intelligence. Let me think. I got to get it right here. Defense Intelligence Agency. He was Defense Intelligence Agency.
Okay.
And his name Evans. I think his name was Evans. He was a lieutenant colonel. And the strange thing about that is, and that one sort of escaped everybody. Even though in a couple of lectures I've actually mentioned the fact that this guy is the guy that made the initial phone call to Bill Moore and said, "You're the only guy who knows what you're talking about, and we want to meet with you." And so this Evans guy and Doty meet with Bill Moore. And they basically do the same thing. They give him all these contacts, and we're going to set you up. You're going to be the disclosure guy. And Bill Moore goes out and has what becomes known as the famous Avery, where he gives everybody bird names. He and Jamie Chandray, who was his partner, a film producer guy out of Los Angeles, they give all these guys bird names so they can talk about them when they're talking on the telephone, so nobody knows who these people are. So there's the Condor and the Falcon, and all these. The Penguin is John Alexander, and the Pelican is Ron Pandolfi, and everybody. Kit Green is the Blue Jay, and all these people have these names.
And Grant, at this point we should kind of wrap out when this started, because it started with John. Well, it didn't start with John Alexander. Alexander, but John Alexander was the first guy at the first meeting who created the Avery. Is that, well, it was actually a theoretical working group.
No, it was but you see, it was actually just Bill Moore giving these people names, bird names, and most of these people, like I talked to, for example, I talked to Scott Jones, who was always rumored to be the Falcon. He was a very powerful guy. He was the guy that helped brief Clinton science advisor with Rockefeller.
Exactly.
So he was a very, very high level guy. I remember when Bill Moore claimed who the Falcon was later on, I contacted Scott Jones. I said, "Oh, you don't have to worry anymore. You're not the Falcon anymore." And he said, "Oh, I've had about 3 or 4 different bird names." So none of these guys really knew what their bird name was. Only Bill Moore and Jamie Chandray knew who the actual birds were, because it was just a thing that they had. But it sort of became a cult thing where all these guys knew that they had bird names, and what they were people inside intelligence, the government, military, who had at one point in their career run up against the UFO phenomena. So, for example, Kit Green is an example. Kit Green ran the Weird Desk at the CIA from 69 to 83, and he was known as the Blue Jay. And then he was a contractor for the CIA, so he left the CIA, retired, and he's still doing contract work for the CIA. And he was very interested in contacting these other guys because everybody had a piece of the puzzle. Like John Alexander had a piece of the puzzle, Scott Jones had a piece of the puzzle. And the story I was told, for example, about Kit Green, this guy was a physiologist. He's a doctor. And he always was trying to get briefed on the alien autopsy. And he could not get briefed. So he knew a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. But the thing that he really wanted to know, the alien autopsy stuff, he was never given a clearance to know what was going on. So these guys are all there. And this initial guy, one of the things that people, they sort of don't really realize is where a lot of the documents we have. For example, this defense intelligence guy who initially contacted Bill Moore in 1980 when the book tour starts, he writes the Roswell incident, which I think sold 1 million copies. It was a big selling book. And he phones him, and this guy was the guy who wrote the report on the Iranian jet fighter incident, where the jet fighter is scrambled and all the stuff is shut down in this in the jet fighter, where he's sitting there. This is the guy that wrote the report, and most people don't know that. And the other thing that happened, that he was the guy who leaked the documents about the NORAD site, the NORAD stuff in 1975 when I had my first sighting. All the NORAD, there was the NORAD documents. I remember Bob Pratt from the National Enquirer showing them to me back at that time. And these were documents that they had been given alert on, and the National Enquirer forced them out. But it was this guy, this defense intelligence guy, who actually leaked those documents. So everybody knows about the documents, and nobody ever thinks about it, like, where did that document actually come from? It was actually leaked. So Bill Moore starts this process in the 1980s, and he's got these Avery guys, and they start feeding him material. And what I say they're doing, they're managing the story.
Aren't they already brought together by John Alexander?
No,
Alexander as a theoretical working group, though, right?
No, I can get that in a sec. So it starts.
Okay. I'm ahead of you. Yeah. Okay.
No, it starts in 1980, and John is just one of the guys. He's the Pelican. That's his. Oh no, he's the Penguin. John Alexander, I believe, was the Penguin. Although Bill Moore's never confirmed who was who, but he was known as the Penguin. So he was one of the sources that Bill Moore was using, and he had like Coleman. He had Pandolfi, Kit Green, Ron Pandolfi. There was 24 of these people. There was a huge list of people that he had. And
wasn't Doty part of this at the time?
Doty, everybody always said he was the Falcon, but he wasn't the Falcon. He played the Falcon on a documentary in 1988, which was called UFO Cover-Up Live. And this was the documentary where everybody said, this is the worst documentary in the world. They were reading off cue cards and all this kind of stuff. And they were. And that was because it was being run by Gray Advertising. It was a CIA front company. And this was Ronald Reagan doing a disclosure. He was dropping a bunch of material into the UFO community. This is October of 1988. This is 2 weeks before the election, before Reagan leaves office. And they basically, that's when the Area 51 idea is introduced. It's on a flowchart. on that documentary. If you look at this UFO Cover-Up Live, you'll see a flow chart, and it shows Area 51. Well, Bob Lazar would not come public until the spring of the next year. So before Bob Lazar ever went onto the base, that was in a flowchart on UFO Cover-Up Live. The other thing that was on the flowchart was a parapsychology research unit at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and that's on the flowchart, and that would not be declassified till 1995 when Ron Pandolfi would get control of it at the CIA. He would grab it away from the Defense Intelligence Agency, get it to the CIA, and then make it disappear or go into the black world. He shut down the remote viewing program, but the remote viewing program was on this 1988 documentary. So all this stuff was sort of put out there and leaked. So Bill starts this in 1980, 81. He gets the idea of MJ-12. There's these documents, and all the documents are phony, but they all point to the fact that MJ-12 was for real. And so they alter documents, and there are actually, most people don't realize. Everybody says, oh, the MJ-12 document is real, but what they don't realize is there were 3,700 pages of documents. And most of these documents were investigated by Bob Wood and Ryan Wood, his son, and that $250,000 was put up by Joe Firmage to research those documents. That's and they started to leak in the 1990s. So there's 3,700 pages of documents. So this is not, and people say, oh, it's Richard Doty's behind MJ-12, and I say absolute garbage. Come on, Richard Doty was gone in 1986 or 87 at the latest. He was gone in 87, and these documents didn't start leaking until 5 years later. This was an organization. True. You don't have one guy leaking 3,700 pages of documents, and so this is what they did. So Bill Moore starts it. He creates this Avery with these 24 guys, and these guys start to recycle. So they all realize, this is my impression. They all realize there's these other guys. So they realize, that there's other people that have these clearances, and they get to know each other, and they start sort of an email exchange between each other.
Right now, save 50 to 70% off at Banana Republic factory stores and online. And 60% off absolutely everything at Gap factory stores. Save even more with 40% off clearance at Gap factory stores. And at Banana Republic factory, sweaters start at $19.99 and scarves start at $9.99. Hurry! Search our store locator for your nearest Gap factory and Banana Republic factory store, or shop us online.
Or they're talking back and forth with each other, and they're all like trying to figure out what's going on. So in 1985, John Alexander, who's one of the Avery, starts a group, and he said this was just personal interest. And I think I was the one that actually put out the document that said it was a top secret restricted program, and that was the same classification that was on the MJ-12 document. And it was at a secure facility in Virginia. And it was always called, the New York Times put out a book called, that talked about it was the UFO Working Group. So when I got the one document that was the cover page of it, I put just enough of the cover page to prove that I had the document on a lecture that I did in Eureka Springs. And it was at that lecture that Tim Good came up to me, and so did George Wingfield, who worked on crop circles in the early days.
Oh, yeah,
and they said,
I forgot about him.
And they said to me, and I showed all the names, except for two. I took two of the names off, but I showed about 18 of the names of the people that were in this, what was called the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group.
Thank you. I can never remember the whole title.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the reason they called it that, according to John, was they didn't want it FOIA. So everybody's going to do an FOIA, so you don't put UFO, so you call it the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group. So I put just enough on this chart, on one of the slides, to show that that's what it was called. And then suddenly Tim Good approaches me, and so does Wingfield right after the lecture, and said, you showed some names, because I only showed the names for like 2 seconds. It's so like nobody could copy them down. And they said, you showed some names of a group. Could we get the names? I said, yeah, sure, you can get the names. So I give them the names, and then suddenly I get a phone call from Hal Puthoff, who's now part of the Tom DeLonge operation. Right. And Hal contacts me. Hal almost never contacts me. I mean, Hal's a busy guy. He's doing his thing, whatever. And so Hal contacts me, and he says, I understand you've got a list of names of a group that I was supposedly part of. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, could I get the list? I said, yeah, sure. So I sent him all the lists except for the same 2 names I took off. Right. And I sent it to him, and I never heard anything more about it. But I think George, I guess everybody had gone to him, and like Tim Good had gone to him and asked, were you part of this group? And then John Alexander goes public and he said, oh, it was called the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group and nobody had notes. So then my next lecture, I put out the fact, I said, oh, and I got the notes too. and then the next lecture, it was called the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group and nobody was supposed to have notes. And you and I both, we were discussing before we had a big meeting in Laughlin that we have to sort of release that Melinda Leslie and Randy Copain have been working on this for 25 years. I didn't realize this until a couple of months ago or last month when you notified me of this.
To be really honest about the whole thing, I think it's 28 years plus that they've been working on it. And I've known Melinda now for 10 years, and her and I started talking about it for the minute we met. Yeah. So I got fed in, and I already knew. I knew quite a bit about it, which was quite surprising to me. And I didn't know that you were the person I had gotten all that information from through the grapevine. But anyhow, I digress. Yeah. But go ahead. And she had the notes as well. She didn't have the cover page. I've got the cover page, which shows the classification and the advanced physics. She's got all the notes, and she got them from this friend of hers, Ed Hauk or whatever, that she has the notes, and I haven't compared them yet. I saw the notes and it looked like the same notes I had. So it's basically handwritten notes of different subjects that they brought up. And I know that some of the notes indicated, for example, on the one subject they discussed like cattle mutilations, they discussed abductions, and so you'd have a page and have abductions on top, and there would be a couple of notes. And some of the notes I had indicated that those subjects hadn't come up yet, but the one that had the back engineering on UFOs had Bobby Ray Inman's name on there. And he's always been rumored to be the guy that was the guy that was in charge of back engineering flying saucers. He worked at SAIC, and this is on the notes I have. So Melinda had the same notes as I had. Basically, it was taken by a different person. My guy is a different guy than hers, but she gave a lot of support to the fact that John did have this group. And so what happens is you have this same group. So these guys are interested in what's going on. So then you get all these guys, like Ron Pandolfi shows up at that meeting, Kit Green shows up at the meeting, Hal Puthoff is there, Bob Wood is there, all the same characters as the Avery, and they cycle through John Alexander's group. Because if you're John Alexander and you want to know what's going on, you're going to bring in the Avery, because these are the guys that have had the interaction with the UFO phenomena. The same as they reappear again when Bob Bigelow sets up NIDS. If you look at the NIDS group, it's the same group. He gets the same guys, and he brings them in at 3 point. They're now adding Colin Kelleher and a few other people. But anyhow, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So that's the thing is you get these guys, and you if you want to know what's going on, these guys have been through the cycle, and they bring them in, and now you see here again comes up Tom DeLonge, and who do you see? Jacques Vallée. You see John Alexander's name. You see Hal Puthoff. You see Kit Green. It's the same group of guys, and they're just cycling them back through again, and they all just want to know what's going on. For example, I was looking at the whole contact because I had known Hal Puthoff for a number of years. I really haven't had that much contact. I would ask him, for example, because there was no UFO files in the White House. I went to him because he's the guy that did remote viewing, and I wanted to know there was no remote viewing files in the White House either. So I wanted to clarify the fact that just because there's no files doesn't mean the president isn't briefed. So I contacted Hal Puthoff and I said, did the president get briefed on remote viewing? And he said, up to Bush vice president, yes. And I guess after that, he left the program. He didn't say, but he said, up to that point, I can confirm, yes, the president was briefed. And that would confirm that just because there's no documents in the archives doesn't mean that the president wasn't briefed on the subject. And so I would contact Hal back and forth over the years on little things like that. I'd just ask him, and he'd say yes, no, that sort of stuff. But here you have him and all these guys that have been involved. Even if you're familiar with in the UFO community, there's this famous story called the Core Story, and that was a meeting that took place with these Avery guys. It was Hal Puthoff, and it was Jacques Vallée, and it was Kit Green in this famous meeting. that took place at Denny's restaurant in 1987. And what they did is they sat down and said, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff going on in the UFO community. What do we know for sure? And this is what became known as the core story. What do we know for sure? There has been a visit. There have been visitations. There has been at least 3. 1940s, 1970 or 80, and 1990s. There was a visit, and there was a crash, and there's been some back engineering. That's all we know, and that's became known as the core story, the basic core story of ufology. And again, it's these guys, and to me, people see them as this a government group. To me, they're not a government. They're just a bunch of guys who I used to call them MJ-12 too. Because I had an interaction with one who was connected. He knew all of them. He had been with NIDS. He wasn't really an Avery guy, but he was there when all the Avery was there. And he was having these conversations with presidents and about what was called the Holloman Air Force Base film. This is the story of where they land a craft at Holloman Air Force Base. It's filmed from 5 different angles up in the air. There's a helicopter and stuff. And this becomes Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This documentary goes to Steven Spielberg. He turns it into Close Encounters of the Third Kind. They move it from an Air Force base to this mountain thing. It's all predicted. People are filming. It's all predicted. And so they're trying to help put off. And this guy are trying to track down the Holloman Air Force Base filming, because I did a lot of work on it. I knew Bob Emenegger, who had the film at one time.
You did? I didn't know you knew Bob Emenegger. I can never say his name right. Yeah, oh, my God. Because
I used to lecture at Eureka Springs every year, and I would go to his house, and I would interview him. And Bob was like a straight shooter. He just had no interest whatsoever in UFOs. None. It was like, my story is true. They called me in to Norton Air Force Base in 1973, I think it was. He was working for the Nixon re-election campaign. He was an advertising executive. He knew Bob Haldeman. He'd gone to school he was in Bob Haldeman. He knew the communications guy in the Nixon White House. He was in the Air Force with him. So he had these connections to Nixon, and he gets brought in with Alan Sandler, his partner, and that's when he doesn't believe in UFOs. He thinks he's what I was telling me the story. He said, Margaret, his wife was really into it. She knew everything backwards and forwards. And he said, Margaret, we quit reading that garbage, the alien had my baby stuff. And then he gets to Norton Air Force Base, and they say, this is 1973, and Emenegger is the intelligence guy. Emenegger's got contacts to the FBI and CIA and stuff. And he sets up the meeting. And they're to do these documentaries on 3D holography, working with dolphins, all these kind of defense programs. And they're to do these 8 documentaries. And then Paul Shartle, who's the guy who's briefing them, says, and we'd also like you to do this UFO documentary, and we'd like you to hide it under the other documentaries. And Bob said, are you kidding me? Are you telling me this is for real? He was like shocked. I mean, suddenly his wife is right, and it's like, are you kidding me? And that's when Charles says, what would you say if we told you that we was a landing at Holloman Air Force Base in May of 1971, and it was filmed from different angles and stuff like that, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he's given all the details of who was there and all this sort of stuff. And so they get this film, and it's pulled at the last minute. They're doing the documentary, and at the last minute, they pull the film. They say it's the White House.
This is where I lose touch with that whole story. Right at that point, they pull the film. Were they going to use pieces of that film in their real documentary?
They were told that they would be allowed by Bill Coleman, who is apparently just died, and Bill Coleman, who was the public relations officer for Blue Book. They had gone to the Pentagon, to the E-ring, the power ring in there, and they told me, or Bob told me, that they would walk into the Pentagon. They would not even sign in. They just walk right in. And they would have these meetings with and they were given this film by Coleman, and they were told they could use it. And at the last minute, they said it's Watergate. We've got trouble. It's not the right time. We have to pull a film. And Bob said there was these 2 very heavy set people in this small little tiny Datsun who had put the film canisters in the back seat in California at Norton, and they drove this thing back to the Pentagon. So when the film came out, they did like artist renditions of this landing thing, and they told the story. And it was this may have happened in the past, or it may happen in the future, and it may actually happen in the past. And then suddenly I discovered there was 8 seconds of the film in the documentary. So I go back to Bob, and I said to Bob, Yeah.
Grant, I just got to interrupt you for a second. All these years, I thought that was faked because I couldn't find anybody to verify that there was any real footage in that documentary.
It was 8 seconds, yeah. And so I went to Bob. And I'm good friends with Bob. So I said, Bob, there's 8 seconds of film in there. And he goes, yeah. And I said, I thought you told me they took the film back. And he told me the whole story about these guys, these heavy-set people in this small little tiny Datsun driving across the country with this thing. And I said, but Bob, there's 8 seconds of film in the documentary. And he said, well, it was just background. And I said, background? What do you mean it was background? And he said, well, it didn't show anything. And it made total sense. So they allowed them to use the 8 seconds. And what you see is this light coming over the horizon. It's coming. There's a mountain thing. And you hear they got the voice. They're putting the voice, identify yourself. And you see this light coming across. And the whole thing is the classified part is when it lands, when you can see the aliens and you can actually see the craft up close. That's classified. It doesn't. That's why they're saying it's background, because it didn't really mean anything. You just see this thing. Right. You can actually see, if you watch the documentary, you can tell where the 8 seconds are, because it clip and then clip and it clips again and it goes back out into another frame. And you can tell that it's actual footage they've stuck in there. So he confirmed to me that this was there. And there was a bunch of stuff that they were basically given. For example, there's a story that I had that they had all this footage. And so I said to him that they had the one with the famous film where they launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base. The thing goes up and these 2 UFOs go around the craft, and then they sort of shoot this little beam into it and it falls into the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. And he describes it, except the thing about the beam, getting shot with the beam. But everything else they've got. And he's describing this thing, and he described this guy that did the analysis of it. He was a guy from Blue Book who had done the analysis, the early analysis for the Robertson panel. This was an expert, and there was no way this was an actual object. And all this sort of verification. And then I'm talking to Bob, and again, he's watching the Comedy Channel. He's no interest in UFOs. And I said, So you had to send the Holloman film. Did you send all the other film back? And did you send that film back with the launch? And he goes, I don't know. Alan may still have that. And I went, what? I said, Alan may still have it. Are you kidding me? And he said, yeah, but it was top secret. It had top secret on the canister and it had Quintella's name on it. They had a Blue Book. And I said, Alan's got it? And he said, I don't know. I'll have to check. And then he checked and he said, yeah, Alan's got it. He's got it in his vault. And I go, what? So I tell Angela Joyner this is when Stevensville broke. I was good friends with Angela Joyner. And I told Angela, I said, Angela, we got to get this film. We got to get this film. This film, they've got this top secret film of this launch where these UFOs are around it, and they've got the film. And so then she talks to Bob, and and Alan was a real womanizer, and he wanted her to fly to Oregon to look at this film. And I said, come on, Angela, go and look at this film. So she never did do it, and then she told James Fox. So James Fox found out about the film, and he went to Sandler, and the negotiation started. I won't say what's happened, but if you ever talk to James, you can ask him where it is. But I know he was negotiating. He was negotiating to put this in 701, and Alan, as Bob Emenegger's wife used to tell me, he was as dumb as a bag of hammers, but if you gave him a stick and a piece of gum, he'd come back at the end of the day with a pile of money. He was just really good. And so he was negotiating, and I had heard there was big figures to just look at the film and stuff like that. But Fox was trying to get it. There's confirmation that they actually have a top secret film that they did not hand back for a Blue Book thing, top secret, with Quintella's name on the canister.
Oh my God. Well, James and I live near each other. I might drive over one day and say, okay, buddy, you've been holding out on me. We'll see.
So at one point it sounded like he wasn't getting very far with it, but he did have a backer. He had a big backer for 701 at one point, and then the guy pulled out, and so I don't know if he's got the money that he can sort of throw at this thing. But anyway, that was one of the more interesting stories. So And so there was all sorts of initiatives that have gone down over the years. Bob even told me the one story where he got the phone call from Ron Pandolfi, and I go, you got a phone call from Ron Pandolfi? because he's not interested. I mean, he has no interest in UFOs whatever. Like, and I'll just ask him. Like, that's where I said to him, I said, I'm at his place and he's watching the comedy channel, and his wife is, really into UFOs, and we're talking whatever. But he just sits there and he doesn't say anything, whatever. And then he'll sort of get really critical and she'll say, "Oh, Bob, you just shut up. You've never read a book. What do you know?" And then he just sort of quietens down. And he just sits there. And so I said, that's when I said to him, I said, "Bob, the weird thing was, if it weren't for the location, the Holloman Air Force film sounds exactly like Close Encounters." And that's when he said, "Oh, I didn't tell you?" And I said, "No, you didn't tell me what?" "I didn't tell you I gave a copy to Spielberg?" And I go, "No, you didn't tell me that." And he said, "Well, I told you. Annie Spielberg, his sister, worked as a line producer for me. We did all these documentaries on hypnosis and near-death experiences and stuff like that. She was a line producer. And she said Stephen would like a copy of the documentary." So the documentary, UFOs Past, Present, and Future, came out in 1975. Close Encounters came out in 1977. So Annie takes a copy of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the Holloman Air Force Base documentary, to Steven Spielberg. And then after the Close Encounters was filmed, according to Bob, he said that Spielberg's mother had come to him and said, "Oh, Bob, I've seen your version of the landing and I've seen Steven's version of the landing, and I like Steven's version better." so Bob, he has all these stories, and it's just so many stories that, I go there and every time it'll be something, and I know, he just doesn't care. He just, but amazing sort of career. And like he got offered in 83. It was the same thing. They did this documentary in 75. They dropped a bunch of stuff in this documentary about, for example, the channeling of the alien at the CIA. And I knew this was a true story because the Canadians had worked with this woman. And Bob Friend, on this documentary, you can actually look it up on the internet. It was redone in 1979, and it was called UFOs That Has Begun. And in that documentary...
Oh, my God. Grant, that's one of my favorite movies. We played it at our UFO Con last year in our film festivals. Our favorite movie.
Yeah, and so you see Bob Friend there talking, and he's doing this whole thing with the channeling of the alien at the National Photographic Interpretation Center. Yeah. Which... it was this top secret building in Washington that was in the slums of Washington, D.C. And all the people, all the hobos and the homeless people that were in the area used to think that they were printing money in the building because there was so much security on this building. And it was where they analyzed all the U-2 and all the SR-71 and the spy photographs. And they put it in the worst part of Washington so the Russians would never find it there. The last place they'd look for this thing. And that's where what happens is in 1954... there's a woman that's channeling an alien by the name of Afa. She lives in Elliott, Maine, just down the street from Betty Hill. And she
isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And she's channeling this, and the Canadians are using her as a source. So the Canadians are going down there. Wilbur Smith, who ran the Canadian program, was going down there. They were getting information from her and doing these channeling sessions. And Navy intelligence was watching her. CIA was watching her. Air Force was watching her. Everybody was watching this woman. And even Secret Service. They had sent a thing to the Secret Service, to the president, about her. And so she was doing this channeling thing, and Navy intelligence saw her in 54. And then these two guys, and the cover story was they went there to get flying time. So these two Navy intelligence guys, one was connected to the CIA, fly to Elliott, Maine to talk to her. And she's doing the channeling thing, and they're asking questions and stuff like that. And then she says, "Well, why don't you just sit down and why don't you do it?" And so they sit down. The one guy sits down. I think his name is Nisham. And she puts his hand on his right shoulder. And suddenly this guy starts this automatic writing thing, which is the same thing these Zendra guys are doing. It's this automatic writing thing.
Right. I was just going to say, isn't that a weird coincidence?
So anyhow. These two Navy intelligence guys get all excited. And they go racing off. And they go back to the CIA in Washington. And they go to Arthur Lundahl. And this is where you get in this, you see this recycling of stuff. So right now, the guy that runs the UFO desk or the Weird desk is Ron Pandolfi. He's run it since 1983. Before him was Kit Green from 69 to 80, from 83. And before Kit Green was a guy by the name of Arthur Lundahl. And Arthur Lundahl was the guy who briefed Kennedy on the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was a photographic expert. He was the guy that did all the analysis of the Robertson Panel UFO films.
Right.
And he ran a Navy lab, and the CIA took him, and he created the CIA lab, which analyzed all the U-2 SR-71. It was called the National Photographic Interpretation Center. So he's
now, I got to throw this out. What about Hawkeye Works or whatever it was called over at the Kodak plant in New York? What is the town that it's in? God, it just left me. Rochester, New York. The CIA Hawkeye Works, where they developed the Zapruder film. Does it play into this at all? Do you know?
I've never heard that. No.
I'll talk to you about it off air later. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So anyway, they go there, and Art Lundahl is this guy. He's fascinating. In fact, one of the connections I had with Hal Puthoff was because I knew this connection that there is a guy inside the CIA who's like the Fox Mulder guy. I mean, and he's the UFO guy, and he's the parapsychology guy, and ghost guy, and it's all phenomenology. They don't call it UFOs; they call it phenomenology. So Arthur Lundahl was the first guy, and I had a collection of his writings. He had written UFO letters to people like James McDonald and people like that. So I had this collection of Arthur Lundahl's letters. And I guess somehow Hal Puthoff found out about it. And he said, I understand you got a collection of letters from Art Lundahl. I said, yes, I do. Could I get a copy of those letters? Because he knew the connection. He was CIA. He was, in fact, whether it's Kit Green or Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff was the guy that ran the remote viewing program in the 70s for the CIA, and Kit Green was the control officer for the remote viewing program from the CIA. They apparently have potentially the longest held top secret special access clearances in the country. There's nobody's had a top secret SCI clearance longer than them because they've had it since the 60s. So that's a long time. You got to realize that Hal Puthoff's like in his 80s, and he's had this top secret security clearance for that long. So he knew, he probably knew Lundahl. He probably had talked to him about UFOs and stuff like that. So he asked me for these letters, and sure. So I sent him a copy of all this correspondence that Lundahl had with various people, where he would actually refer to it as the most important subject there is. And stuff like that. So, So anyway, these guys, that's the thing, is these guys cycle through all the time, that they just have these great interests in the subject. And so what happens with the getting back to the Tom DeLonge thing, the reason that Hal Puthoff was involved, according to him, was that he got a phone call from Kit Green. Again, these guys talk to each other all the time, and said, "There's this guy by the name of Tom DeLonge, and you might want to check out what he's doing. He's on the leading edge." So what they find out is that Tom DeLonge is being fed material from various agencies, and if you want to know what's going on, you should be in his camp. So of course he phones up Tom DeLonge, and then he goes in there and is going to help him or whatever, but he gets to be on this leading edge, that he realizes material is being leaked. The same as John Alexander had the UFO working group, whatever you want to call it, the NIDS thing. Is whenever they find there's a situation where they can learn something more about the UFO phenomena, all these Avery guys, they all just show up. So to me, they're just guys, and I've known a lot of them. In fact, Bill Moore, people say all this bad stuff about Bill Moore. Bill Moore I always respected, because Bill Moore was the only guy who ever helped me when we were chasing Dr. Eric Walker, the former president of Penn State University. And I said, this guy knows, he's got 14 honorary doctorate degrees, he's chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis. And he basically confirmed to a researcher that he had been at a series of briefings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and he was this very high-level guy. And we went around trying to get everybody, and Stanton talked to him one time, and he sort of hung up the phone on Stanton. And Stanton said, well, he's not going to talk. What are you going to do? And Stanton didn't want anything to do with it. But Bill Moore said, I really don't agree with your consensus that this guy is who you think he is, but I'm going to check him out. And I'll always give Bill Moore credit for that, because what he did is he said, I got a friend here, BJ, and I'm going to send BJ there. And this took about 6 months, but that was Blue Jay. That was Kit Green from the CIA. And so Kit Green goes, he flies to... Yeah.
Grant, I hate to do this to you, but just remember where you're at. Remember you're at Bill Moore and the president, okay? I mean, the college, whatever. Yeah. Anyhow, remember it, because we got to take a break. Okay. So, folks, we'll be right back. And when we come back in about 15 minutes, Melinda Leslie's going to join us. So it's going to be it's going to be Old Hope Day for us, Grant. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the California MUFON Radio Show. I'm your host, Lorien Fenton. We're here on Inception Radio Network, the home of the most amazing app, and also replayed weekly, probably many a time, over at Mike Barra's Late Night in the Midlands. So thank you for joining us wherever you're listening and how you're listening. Really appreciate it. And I just want to say that Melinda Leslie is going to join us here the second hour. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier in the show. She'll join us as soon as she can get through to MJ, and I'm calling that number, but nobody is answering. That is what she's saying, MJ. So, do you want to call her, MJ? Can you call her? Do you want me to call her? Am I getting an answer? Oh, you're going to try. Okay, good. I can see. Thank God I can see what MJ's doing. Are you there, Melinda?
I'm like, nobody was answering, but now they are. Good.
Okay, good. Now, I got to bring, we're live on air. I'm going to bring Grant back in to talk about what we were talking about before the break. And so you just go mute for a few minutes, and we'll bring you back in. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay, sweetie, thanks. Okay, Grant, so we were just talking about the guy that was the, he was the president of the university, is that correct? I can't think, and Bill Moore was helping you. Bill Moore said, I don't know about this guy, but I'll check him out. Okay, so that's pretty much.
So this is Dr. Eric Walker, who was very good friends with President Eisenhower, and he was appointed president at Penn State by Milton Eisenhower, the president's brother, who was the president before him. And he indicated that he knew what was going on. He's the one that famously said, we asked about MJ-12. He said, I've known of them for 40 years. This is an interview in 1987.
Wow.
I've known of them for 40 years. Leave it alone. There's nothing you can do. You're up against the windmill. You're wasting your time. Unless you have the mind of Einstein, you are never going to solve this thing. And he would talk like that. He couldn't, he would say, I can't talk about UFOs. I don't talk about UFOs because it was classified. But he couldn't hang up the phone. And people would send him letters, and I sat on the sidelines. I usually don't get involved with my victims, but I sort of had people in between me, and people would be writing them and giving them phone calls and stuff, and I was just recording all this stuff, and then we put it in a book. But anyway, so Bill Moore had heard some of the stuff. He'd seen some of the interviews and stuff, and he said, I'll send BJ there. He never mentioned who it was, but I knew it was. It was Kit Green. And Kit Green had worked for the CIA, and both of them had worked on the Glomar Explorer, on the Howard Hughes thing. And because Walker was a submarine expert, he ran the underwater lab for the Navy at Penn State University. So he was an expert on submarines, and he had co-developed a homing torpedo in World War II. And so Kit Green had also worked on the Glomar Explorer at the CIA, and so they went in there, and I just saw.
The holidays are almost here, but you can still treat yourself at Guitar Center with deals like a Casio CDP 135 digital piano, just $299, or a Cordoba Protege ukulele, just $59. Plus weekly doorbuster deals, special financing, the newest and hottest guitars, drums, keys, and more, and exclusive gear you can't get anywhere else. Check out our new location in Daytona Beach, located in the One Daytona Shopping Center. So hurry in and find your sound at Guitar Center.
One email about this. Bill never reported back to me, but I saw an email from these Avery guys. They would send, all these emails are going back and forth, and I never did. I don't know what, I didn't keep it or what happened, but anyway, so he went in there, and then what happened was, as long as they were talking about the Glomar Explorer and the CIA days, it was great old times, and they talked for about an hour, and the minute he brought up the UFO subject, Walker looked at him and said, I don't have to tell you anything. you're not the president. You're not going to get anything out of me. And then he started talking to a pile of books in the corner of the room, sort of giving Kit Green the impression like the room is bugged. And he basically threw Kit Green out of the room. And that's where it ended. Kit Green left Penn State. He'd come from Detroit, went to Penn State University, did this thing, and got thrown out of the office. And so I always respected Bill Moore because he actually sent somebody in there to check this thing out. And Kit's been involved in all sorts of programs. There was a famous one that apparently he's upset about it being leaked. Is the story of him and a guy from the Academy of Sciences in China were going to do an experiment on telepathy, where they were going to put people in. They're going to have a sender and a receiver. They're going to send a telepathic message, and these people would be in MRI machines, and they would test them in MRI machines to see whether the signal was instantaneous,
amplified, or amplified.
Well, where it was same time at the same time. So, is it non-local, or is it taking 5 seconds for the message to get to the other side? So, I don't know if that experiment ever took place, but Kit, you've always heard these things, or the one that's going on right now is the one that we were talking. I think we were talking about.
Yeah, we were talking about the DNA. Yeah,
the DNA and the brain thing, the antenna, which interests me because that's a term that the Latinos use for these antenna people who are able to predict to the minute when a sighting is going to take place, and they call them antennas. And the Kit Green and Hal Puthoff and this Gary Nolan are at Stanford, and they're running this program now. I actually made a contact just recently to give them people, very high-level people who wanted to help. I got no reply, which indicates that this is a closed operation, that they really aren't interested in what anybody's got to say. They didn't respond, and I've known these guys. They would at least say, we can't help you, or forget it, get lost, or whatever. But there was nothing. So that's the Tom DeLonge thing is going to be completely shut down. I have a major writer, Psychology Today, New York Times, who has now come on board. I've talked to her for a long time, and she's now going to do a UFO disclosure book. And she made a contact to the DeLonge operation, and they basically said we don't accept unsolicited projects or programs or whatever the term was they used. And there's been a number of reporters, including I think Linda, tried to contact them. They won't talk to anybody. So this is a thing where they're spinning it out. It's so carefully controlled. If you take a look at when they had this thing, they've got an embedded journalist, which is Leslie Kean, and basically they won't talk to anybody. But Leslie Kean, when this Lou Elizondo, this is the guy, the Department of Defense guy who came out and said, I ran the aerial threat program and it's for real, and confirmed, basically said it's for real. I work for the government and UFOs are for real. And he the day after he retired, he was being interviewed by Leslie Kean. So here you have a situation where she's interviewing all these people. She's got the inside track. Steve Justice had only been retired a couple of weeks or something, and she had the interview with him. She puts the whole story together. So it's this very controlled release. And there's actually and I managed to recover it. It was a tweet that was done by Tom DeLonge a couple of days after the news conference, where he said every word was carefully written for months, which means that before Elizondo and before Justice actually retired, their speeches were actually written for them already. They walked in and so it's almost like the UFO Cover-Up Live thing, that the complaint was that they're reading off cue cards, and they. And the reason they have them off cue cards is because you don't want somebody going off script. You want somebody it's carefully, because the UFO Cover-Up Live, that's where the big debate came about Richard Doty. And I always said, Richard Doty ain't the Falcon. I know he hasn't. There's no way he was the Falcon, because I knew the Falcon was at that documentary. And I asked Bill Moore, because what happened was Bill Coleman was there. He was on, and he was doing his little deal on the whole Manifest film and all this stuff. And he told Billy Cox, who I knew very well from the 1980s, who did work for the USA Today, and then he worked for the Tampa Tribune. Very interested in UFOs. He had a close encounter, and got him very interested. And he did this blog thing for years on UFOs, and we were corresponding during the time when this documentary was being made. And the rumor was before it came out that Reagan was going to appear with a live alien, because the core story was out already. And the idea was that Reagan, as he left the office, was going to appear with the live alien. So Billy Cox and I were talking about, is the live alien going to appear? What's going to happen on this? We knew this documentary was coming. And so when the documentary came, he was good friends with Bill Coleman, because Bill Coleman lived down the street from him, not down the street, but he lived close to him in Florida. So he was talking to Bill Coleman, and Bill Coleman said, I can't believe it. The Falcon, I met this guy. I cannot believe this guy was involved. So it wasn't Richard Doty, because we know that Richard Doty was in training for the New Mexico police at that time, and that they had flown to Albuquerque to interview him for the backlit Falcon interview. But Coleman said that he couldn't believe who this guy was, and Billy Cox tried to get him to describe who it was. So I contacted Bill Moore, and I said, Bill Coleman said that Falcon was in the audience. Is that true? And he said, well, I'll tell you what, Grant. There was only 12 people in the audience. Let's just leave it at that, which basically confirmed, yes, the Falcon was actually there. And it's the same thing. You have this guy in the background who's a retired CIA. That's how it works. So the Falcon was retired CIA. They brought him out of retirement to do this, and that's how it works. The guy that's running Tom DeLonge's operation is Jim Semivan. Jim Semivan was a two-star general in the equivalent. He was an SES-2. He was in the Bush White House. He was in the president's office every day. He ran the drone program, very high level. There's an award named after him, CIA, very powerful guy. And he's an experiencer. He had 3 beings in his room in the 1990s. And his wife was curled over in a fetus position. And then the next thing he knew, he was standing outside the house and he was watching this flying saucer fly away. So he's an experiencer. And he went and tried to get briefed, and they wouldn't brief him. Tenet said, you don't want this. You don't need this. You're going to be stereotyped. And what happens is, as soon as he retires in 2008, that's when Ron Pandolfi briefs him and brings him into the program. Because you can't, if you're in the CIA, you can't be involved in this. It's all ex-CIA people, because then it's in the black world. So Jim Semivan is running Tom DeLonge's operation. I don't care what anybody says. He's running the operation, and it's all very carefully controlled. It's all very carefully scripted, and you have these stories. It's almost like it's run by the government, because it's so they're missing all the deadlines. In fact, there's a story that I had put out, the rumor that it was happening this Sunday, but now I heard from MUFON in Canada here. They said, have you heard this? The film's coming out, because there's a story that...
Wait, what are you talking about? I'm so confused. So go ahead, explain it in a little more detail, because I'm lost.
Lou Elizondo, the guy that said I ran the program, also stated that we are going to release UFO footage that is, what's the word for it?
Compelling evidence, or
no, UFO footage, UFO video that is sanctioned, that the government is actually going to sign off on it. The government is going to say, yes, it's legitimate stuff. And he said that almost, I think it was either in the news conference or it was to Leslie Kean. It happened right at that news conference thing. So then the story came out on November the 18th. Tom DeLonge put out a tweet that said, there's going to be a release of the film within 2 weeks, and I'm not doing the release. So it's not going to be Tom DeLonge. It's going to be one of the people. So it's probably going to be Lou Elizondo, because he's the guy who talked about it. Then they pulled that tweet. Then they put another tweet out that said it would be 3 weeks from November the 18th. Then there was a rumor last week that said Sunday. Something was going to happen Sunday, and the rumor was New York Times. Then I got a guy confirmed to me just today, said, no, it's not New York Times, but it's big. Then I get a phone call from Stu Bundy in Toronto today, and he said, I hear the film's coming. Is it coming today or tomorrow or something? So there's this film that they're going to drop that is going to be sanctioned, that this is legitimate film, and it may be the Nimitz film. I put it on my White House UFO site, because I managed to figure out what the film was, and I put it up, but it's not confirmed by the government. So that may be the film, one of the films that they're going to release, but it's actually going to say there's going to be a sign-off that the government actually authenticates that this is legitimate film.
Oh my God. Well, that's disclosure, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yeah, well, I think what they've done, and this is my impression of what they've done, is they've gone back to 1947. They tried to figure out, how do we get this thing out? So what they do is they say, let's start at 1947 again. We make the announcement, and it has worked. They make the announcement and say, yes, there are UFOs, and we haven't got the foggiest notion what's going on, and we're going to investigate it. And so they start where they should have done in 1947, instead of saying there's nothing going on, it's all
It's weather balloon
and craps and like that. So they've done that. And the other thing that everybody always talks about the money, and I think what's happened here is that the other thing that they've done is, even if you say UFOs are real, you're stuck in a box. How do you get the technology out? So what they do is they bring in this Steve Justice guy. First they had, and nobody's explained this, you had originally, Tom DeLonge gets set up with these two generals. One is the guy who's assistant head of Space Command. And the other guy was the guy that ran the lab at Wright Patterson Air Force Base where the bodies are supposed to be. This McKay and this McCaslin general guys. And then Robert Weiss, who was the head of Lockheed Skunk Works. So in the Podesta emails, these guys are identified as Tom DeLonge's inside sources. So when he goes for the news conference, then it's what I call the B team. You put the B team out. You don't have the generals anymore. Now you've got people under the generals. So you got this Lou Elizondo guy who's not a general, but he's in that department. And you have Steve Justice, who's not Robert Weiss, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works. He's a Lockheed Skunk Works guy, and they're coming out. So they raised this money, and the whole thing was, well, they can spend this $2 million they've raised in like 15 minutes. This is nuts. But that may be just a cover for what they're actually doing is because Steve Justice is stating that he is going to produce material that was worked on at Lockheed Skunk Works. This is classified material. You go to jail for this kind of stuff. When you walk out of Lockheed, you don't just say, now I'm going to tell her what's going on. So this is the leak. This is how they move the black technology into the white world. This is the scam. They've got the $2 million. Steve Justice is bringing it across, and it's worked because nobody even says anything. It's almost like when Lou Elizondo stood up and said, it's for real. We have UFOs. I worked the program, and I'm in the government. Everybody just said, well, what about the money? He's running a scam. The money. Nobody even considered the fact that they had actually disclosed. They just want to talk about the money. And the money is just a cover. It's just a thing to distract people from Justice saying, I'm going to bring this black technology into the world, and we're going to build this flying saucer. And so you really don't need that much money. All you need is Steve Justice to bring the material out of Lockheed Skunk Works and put it in the white world. That's how they move the technology out of the black world.
Interesting. That's very interesting because I know exactly what you're saying. Because when I watched it and he said that, I thought to myself, well, every person who's been abducted or has contact already knows this. Yeah. So they're going to gloss right over that, and it's not going to make any sense to anybody else because they're going to think these guys are nuts. I mean, you got to realize you got my sister who doesn't believe in any of this, and she would hear that and she'd go, "Oh, these guys are nuts," and she'd turn it off and she'd forget about it, right? Yeah. Then you have the UFO community going, "Oh, all the contactees are going, oh, we already know that. Now what are you guys up to? How are you going to screw us over this time, right?" Yeah. And everybody forgot that what they're trying to do is they're trying to do their own thing out in the public now for the people that are under 25. So that in 20 years, there's no big deal when these aliens start showing up and doing whatever they do. You know, that's what I'm seeing. That's just my take on it, Grant. What's your take on it? Yeah,
I the way I look at these guys is because I know some of these guys. I mean, I know some people very close to Semi Van. I've heard in great detail his story, how they wanted money, that he believed that this thing had to be funded, and it has to do with this big thing in Sweden where they've got all this UFO material, and Semi Van was there, and he wants material released for academics to study the phenomena and stuff like that. So I know that Semi Van is a guy. He's not like the evil guy in the government. He's a guy who's trying to figure out what's going on, and he's had this experience. And so the way I look at these people is they got this very difficult problem. They screwed it up in 1947, and they're trying to figure out, how do we do this without blowing up without going down in flames ourselves? And it's actually worked because nobody's picking up on this. It's like I always said, like, what happened to the two generals and Robert Weiss? They came out, they were identified. That we actually had a researcher go to the New York Times, to 3 reporters at the New York Times, and said, These guys have been outed. It's in WikiLeaks. They had a meeting with John Podesta on UFO disclosure. Are you going to do something about this? And the New York Times, all three reporters said, we'll pass on the story. So nobody's going. Same as Chase Brandon comes out in 2012. He's the second highest guy to speak publicly on behalf of the CIA. He's like super high level CIA guy. He comes out and says, Roswell was real. It was extraterrestrial, and there are bodies. And he walks back in the shadows, and nobody bothers to even chase the guy. So they put this stuff out, and nobody does anything because everybody's so busy with their life, sending their kids to soccer practice and making a job and trying to pay the bills and stuff. That's what they're doing. So I look at it as a bunch of guys who have a really difficult situation, and they're trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we get this thing out? We want this thing out. We realize it's got to get out. And how do we do it? And it makes sense the way they just drop this thing and they run this money thing that everybody picked up on. All people talked about was the money. Nobody picked up on anything else that happened in that thing. So they've basically done this, and that's why you can see it's so carefully controlled. They will not talk to anybody. They will not, and it's
I know. I can't get
controlled.
an interview with him to save my rear end. Not that I ever could anyhow, but I mean, even if I tried, he would say no.
Sure, and Linda Howe talks about the fact that he came to her, and DeLong came to her and said, you're going to be one of my stars, and all these offers and this and that and stuff. And then he just cut her off, and she can't talk to him either. And he approached her and made these offers like, you got to be part of my team, and you know everything, and you're the greatest, and all this sort of stuff. And she can't get a hold of him either. So they've cut off everybody, and that shows this idea. It's almost like the script, like the UFO Cover-Up Live, where it's all scripted, where everybody stays on script, nobody goes off script. The only people that are allowed to interview are the people that we allow. So Leslie Kean does interviews. You allow one interview with Rogan, nobody else. We don't want everybody going off script. We don't want Lorien doing a story and quoting Tom DeLonge and screwing the thing up or whatever. It's all carefully controlled.
We don't want her digging into his past and bringing it out to on my audience to like what he said in the past. No, we don't want that. Yeah. And now, Grant, Linda, just hold on one second. Here's what I wanted to ask.
I want to jump in on this, you guys. I have stuff to say.
I'm sure you do. I got one question for both of you, and I'm going to answer it first, because my problem with the whole thing, Grant, is I understand what they're doing, and I get it, and I did catch the fact that they disclosed in that. But my problem with it, again, as you both know, is that I cannot stand an external force that has really nothing to do with the whole UFO community, like boots on the ground, like Grant, Melinda, and Lorien. Like, we live this every day of our lives, right? These guys pop in and decide how they're going to control what we are hearing from them. And they what's so bizarre to me, Grant, is that they disclosed during that conference and nobody ever talked about it. See, that's how much mind control plays in this, and social media, and how they're controlling all of how we're supposed to think about this. And it's making me crazy. I can't stand it. It makes me nuts. So, Grant, let's start with Melinda first. Let's go. Melinda, what is your take on what they're doing, and how did you react to it?
I think everyone needs to keep it in mind, and you said disclosure right then, and a couple of minutes ago in this conversation, Lorien, you said, about being disclosure. What we have to remember is there's disclosure with a capital D, and then there's soft disclosure.
Well, true.
What we're getting here is soft disclosure. Absolutely. This is not an overnight deal. This is a 40 or 50-year plan that we're in the middle of. Okay,
that's true.
So this is not everything overnight. I agree that with Grant that this may be an attempt to start to bring some of the technologies and whatnot into the white world. I'll believe it when I see it, but it could be their attempt to start that process. But separately, it is soft disclosure, and everyone needs to remember. And when I say everyone, I mean both of you guys and your audience, that the whole point to the working group and their involvement all along, and about every 5 years or so, they roll out another program, or multiple programs, as Grant has been quick to say. And this is just the current program. A lot of their attempts to do this before went so far, and then they pulled back. This is brand new. Let's see how long it keeps going. It might get pulled back as well. But the point being that ufology is being manipulated from behind the scenes. You were just saying, I hate when these guys come in, these seemingly outsiders. Lorien, these aren't ufology outsiders at all.
I know they aren't.
Guys, a lot of these guys have been very, very active in ufology from the get-go.
Well, that's true. I'm just saying, but are they? I don't know. I don't like being manipulated, Melinda. I hate it.
Well, but the thing is, it's been manipulated for 50 years.
I know.
Yeah, we don't like it, but it's the way ufology works, or the way it doesn't work, as the case may be. But
yeah,
but
I don't have to accept
we've been manipulated from the get-go that the UFOs and the presence of others and the technology associated with it is so significant that it has been an intelligence-run operation from the get-go, that the government/shadow government have been involved with this subject matter, with the ETs, with the development of the technology, from pre-Roswell, I mean, that's 70 years, and there's evidence that they've been involved before then. That's how they had all the procedures in place at Roswell. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel with Roswell. They knew how to handle the situation because they had handled even situations prior to that.
You bet.
And so all along, this has been manipulated and controlled. One of the members of the working group once said to me, and I've been researching this, and I applaud that Grant has been onto it. For Grant, I don't know when you first stumbled onto them and got involved with the aviary and everything, but whatever it's been. My research associate and I you and I have talked about this, have been involved in this for about 28, 29 years now. I'd say 28 years. And really, I would say very hardcore, working at it for 25 years. But again, the whole point being is it's a study in how ufology has been manipulated all along. And as I started to say, one of these guys, I always call it the "we're in it to spin it" speech. He said, we're involved in ufology to direct it and steer it where we want it to go and steer it away from where we don't want, and so they've been involved in that way ever since. And he also said we answer to a bigger umbrella group. I have never thought the working group was the current incarnation of, MJ-12 or something. I don't think so. That they answer to a bigger umbrella group, and that they're just one branch of it. But they're one branch of it that is specifically active in ufology, in the UFO field, and in manipulating the UFO field, manipulating certain ufologists, certain directions, leaking stuff when they want it leaked, spinning it back away from that when they don't want it. Excuse me, guys. And anyway, so, and I want people to understand that, that's the point. When we're following the DeLong story and the To the Stars Academy, that's just the current thing that they're involved in. You can go back to, of course, the formation of the aviary and a meeting that took place May 21st, 1985, as maybe an official formation, but they pre-existed that. I had, when Colonel Corso was alive and Bill Burns was still very much involved with him, when I had talked to Bill about some of my research in this early on, and Corso was still alive, he went to Corso, and Corso said, oh yeah, I was involved in that even prior to that, blah, 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 and knew a pre-history of the group going back long before 85 that he was involved in.
Right.
And one of these days I got to pick Bill Burns' brain about what exactly did Corso say about that prehistory. And who else was involved and to what capacity he was, and how did he know about it becoming the working group as we know it now. Mm-hmm. And of course, the aviary was just a name thrown on by Morin Chandray, who said, well, we're working with these guys, and so we know what we're talking about. And so, and they do, we'll come up with these stupid bird names, and as a group we'll call it the aviary and give everyone bird names, because that was their way of talking about it without saying the names of the members, back then, because they didn't want to leak that, because they didn't want to scare these guys off and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so it made sense back then to give them all these code names, hence the terminology aviary. This group never called themselves the aviary. It's all kind of a big joke to them now, but
that's true.
But that was Morin Chandray calling who they're involved with at the time in the working group these names.
Yeah.
And the working group has had
Anyhow, if you've got a conclusion you're coming to, that's great. But I want to make sure Grant gets his answer in on how he feels about these guys running our narrative.
Okay, well, I basically summed up that main point I wanted to make.
Right, and also I had Grant methodically for the first hour go through the history of all this. So we did a lot of history tonight. So you'd be proud of him.
Okay.
So Grant, what's your take on it? How do you feel about them controlling what you and I do on a daily basis?
He who has the gold makes the rules. They're right.
There you go.
But more to the point, the way I look at it, and I think Melinda can sort of back me up. I mean, I know who Melinda's talking about here, and so I'd ask Melinda, are these good guys or bad guys? They're good guys that are facing a situation, like even we're covering up their names. We're covering up their names because we got some justified reason why we are not going to name who these people are, who we're talking about. And I know these people, and I think that they're just people who are doing the best they can with what they've got. And so they're manipulating, yes, but you got to remember that the aliens are doing exactly the same thing. Exactly. They're not disclosing. They could land on the White House lawn and tell us what's going on anytime they want, or they could cover up. They could just turn the lights off on the flying saucers and quit allowing abductees to remember what's going on and stuff like that, and just sort of do it, quietly. So everybody's doing the cover up, and it almost comes down to what Kit Green did. And he had an interview when what do they call it? The Mirage Men did the interview with him, and they said they were talking about the Serpo thing, and he said, "Oh no, don't throw it, Serpo. There's classified material in there." And he said, "You got to realize, what would you do if you had to run this thing?" And so I always look at it with them is that they're guys, and we know who some of these people are. They're friends of ours who were involved in this. And they were guys who thought they were saving the world. They were doing the best they could. And maybe it was the wrong thing to do. Maybe it was the right thing to do. But I see these people as so I would ask the question to Lorien, what would you do if you had this situation? What would you do? Would you just drop the whole thing on the public?
I'm going to say one other quick thing about that. Then I'm going to go back and answer your question.
Okay.
Ask oh God, it just went out of my head. Our buddy in Colorado, come on, Stan. Ask Stan how he feels about this. I mean, Stan Romanek. I mean, you guys say that all these guys are, doing whatever, but look what they did to Stan. I mean, and look what they've done to
all the
Wendell
MyLab
Stevens
cases.
and. Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it, Grant. I'm still pissed off about the fact that they retaliate against people they decide they don't want talking. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be these guys or the guys above them doing that. So okay, so yeah, what would I do? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I would just say you got to remember that I'm a Canadian, and you guys dropped 2 atomic bombs, and you killed over 1 million people in Iran, and people make decisions like that where they say, we got to do this. And it's like the story of the dropping the atomic bombs. The embedded journalist from the New York Times wrote, and when he was flying back on the plane, he said they had it coming. So make people do these decisions, but they still think that they're saving the world. This guy's out of control. He's got to do this. And there's a lot of people in government who will do these kind of things, the same as countries will do things that we think in Canada are like totally insane. Like, what are these people
Grant,
doing?
I think we're at a point. You and I know it matters so much to us about consciousness and that part of this. At some point.
The holidays are almost here, but you can still treat yourself at Guitar Center with deals like a Fender acoustic electric guitar or a Mitchell electric guitar launch pack with amp. Your choice, just $139. Plus, weekly doorbuster deals, special financing, the newest and hottest guitars, drums, keys, and more, and exclusive gear you can't get anywhere else. Check out our new location in Daytona Beach, located in the One Daytona Shopping Center. So hurry in and find your sound at Guitar Center.
You have to start saying no, that this is not acting at a higher consciousness. I don't think the guys...
We can only control ourselves. We can't.
Yes. But I think we can't excuse away bad behavior that has had a lot of very overt criminal activity. Their actions have been criminal in many ways, and ufology has been led around by the nose and lied to by these guys. And these guys are embedded in ufology in a way that ufology doesn't even know that they're being lied to and misled.
But let me.
And that one of these primary guys said to me, "We're in it to spin it." I mean, ufology doesn't, thinks that they're best friends with these guys and not realizing that this is a problem. It is a problem. These guys have an agenda, and that agenda is not about the truth. It's about their version of the truth, which is either never or so slow, so deliberate that meanwhile we're on a petroleum-based economy and ruining the world in a way that we don't need to. So it's like, wait a second, no. I think if ufology makes excuses for these guys, it's like, oh, it's okay, we're little children, we need to be lied to, that's okay. No, it's not okay. We've been manipulated, we've been lied to, and we got to realize that everyone's always like, oh, we're embedded. There's intelligence insiders. Yeah, they run some of our organizations. We need to question that. We need to question the motive of these people. And everyone's glad to have their little. I always call it like their Swiss Army knife, whistleblower in their back pocket, their little insider. We've all got our little insider in our back pocket, like that's like your good luck charm, or that's your e-ticket in, or I'm somebody important because I interface with this insider, this whistleblower.
Or how about it's like that's enough to keep me alive?
Yeah. Well, but the point being, it's like, you guys, some of these, their agenda is not about the truth. It's not about disclosing today. It's not about disclosing in the fucking next 10 years. I don't think, and it's like, we pardon my language, but we have to question this and question these guys' involvement. I mean, I know them too. And I'll sing every name except maybe one, but that's only because I'm currently talking to them and I don't want them to be scared away from talking to me. When
you're justifying. That's why I'm saying they're justifying.
Yeah,
too.
I'm justifying getting information from them. And
that's what they're justifying. They're justifying.
So far, I'm getting information from them.
They think that they're saving the world. I say the same thing, that they don't. None of these guys think they're bad guys. I'm going to be a bad guy. But in the case, they think we have to do this. We've got to shut down Romanek. We've got to shut down Benowitz. This guy is exposing the fact that there's UFOs over the nuclear weapons storage area, and you're manipulated on everything that ever happens. You're like people are sheeples. Everything that they do, they manipulate you on. It's not just UFOs.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No, of course. But again, I think we're not I think we're justifying bad behavior that is not about the truth. It's not about informing people now, and I think
what would you do though? What would you do?
On tricky ground if we do that? I just think Melinda? as far as there being a 40-year disclosure plan or 50 or whatever the hell it is, I guess that makes sense. I know where you're going with that argument. I guess that makes sense. What I'm saying is, to the degree that ufology is manipulated and spun, and people are put out of commission or are given attention when it's useful, and ufology needs to know it's being used and manipulated and be more aware of that. And anyway, so that I guess that's my point.
So what would you do?
Yeah,
You're
Melinda,
in charge.
what would
What are
you
you gonna do?
You're in charge. Okay, you get to go to Stan and have him beaten up.
Well, we put these guys' feet to the fire, and we say, we have to hold them to the truth, and we have to question what they've done in their past and their backgrounds, and demand more from them, or kick them out of ufology.
No, but you're the president. Would you expose all the?
No, I'm not talking about the 40-year disclosure plan. That's different.
No.
I'm just talking about the manipulation.
Melinda, Grant's asking you, if you were the president of the United States, what would you do?
Would you expose
I wouldn't be the president because I disclose. That's an easy answer.
You would disclose all the people that were killed and what you did and take responsibility for all the stuff that happens?
Yeah, because I think
Good
that
for you.
as a human race, we have to start doing that. Otherwise, we're just
I totally
living in
agree
lies.
with her, Grant. Yeah, I totally
Yeah,
agree.
Otherwise,
I
we're just
think
living in
it's easy
lies.
on the
The
outside
lies
to
got
say
to
that.
stop somewhere, and it's got to stop with someone having the balls to speak the truth and take the consequences.
But it's like you've had 14 administrations, 7 Republican, 7 Democrat, and it's sort of like we're sitting on the outside.
They're not keeping the truth because they don't think you can handle it. They're keeping the truth from you for financial reasons because they're profiting from it.
For military.
This is about no one wants their little black project to die. No one wants their underground bases to go away, and their
it's military.
$1 trillion
Military.
black budget.
The United States is the only country that does this. It's all military. It's about separation.
Yes.
It's belief that there's evil people out there, and we can't give the technology to the evil people. And they actually believe this crap. They actually believe that there's evil Mexicans who are raping people. And
no joke. It's the good old-fashioned military-industrial complex.
Or the attitude, just the American attitude, like Canada. We're now the bad guys. We're trying to steal all your jobs, and we're going to shut down NAFTA, and we're the bad guys. And it's just this bad guy thing all the time. And we've got to protect all this stuff from the bad guys, and everybody buys into it. Why do you have like the $700 billion defense budget? Everybody goes along with it because everybody's playing the fear card. Everybody's so scared that that there's the bad Chinese and the bad Arabs and this North Korean guy.
And Lorien will love this. It's all about the mind control because it's really all about profit.
That's right. That's what it's all about.
Corporate profit.
End. It's all about corporate
But that's
profit.
what America's about. That's what America's about. Forget about corporate profit. It's all about material in the United States. It's all about the toys. It's about Christmas.
Well, I wouldn't say just the United States,
absolutely.
Grant. In all fairness, Canada too.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
I don't see any Canadians standing up and disclosing,
No. Well,
no, wait a minute. Paul Hellier's doing a very good job of it. He's
Paul
doing
Hellyer
really
didn't know
well.
anything.
Yeah, but not when he was currently in the position. Now that his voice doesn't matter,
Yeah, he didn't know anything. I knew him in the 70s. He told me clearly he was busy amalgamating the armed forces. He didn't know what was going on. It was only when his son-in-law came to him and said, we're reading that stupid book on Corso 4. And he said, what do you mean? And then the son was working for this general, and the general said, tell your father-in-law to phone me. And he phones, and that's when the general said, it's all real and more. That's when he suddenly found Jesus and started running down this thing about UFOs, but before then he didn't believe.
Okay, now wait a minute. I talked to Paul at the 2015 MUFON conference in LA. Yeah. Paul basically told me, he said, Lorien, I had a sighting. I was out at the cabin, and the UFO came over the lake, and who knows what they did to him.
Oh, yeah, he believes. I mean, I'm not. No, but when was the sighting?
He's a contactee. Let's put it that way. I'm pretty sure he is.
Yeah, but he didn't have any interest until he was reading the Corso book. Until then, he really didn't have any interest in UFOs because I confronted him. I had this situation where I was in Washington D.C. where he said, "I need to talk to you," and he had put out the story that he had done this famous lecture in 1967 in St. Paul, Alberta, where he opened the UFO landing base for this Centennial Project. This town built a UFO landing base, and he gives a speech, and then he said, it was the Royal Canadian Mounted Police guy who gave him the information, and he couldn't remember the guy's name. And I put on my website, it's like, oh, come on, I mean, this is the top expert on UFOs, and he can't remember the guy's name. And so that's when he said, I want to have breakfast with you, and he comes down with these files under his arm, and he said, Mr. Carman, I may be many things. One of them is I'm not a liar. And I go, holy shit, what did I say? And I realized what I had said, and then he said, I did not even write that speech. Someone wrote it for me. me, I don't even remember giving the speech. And so I was confronting him on this thing that he had given this speech that said that the Canadians had opened a base for UFOs to land in 1954. But after 54, the Canadians are just saluting. They're just handing it off to the Americans, the same as most other countries are handing it off. The Canadians, people always ask me, what's going on in Canada? I said, I've got the foggiest notion what's going on in Canada. None.
Well, thank God for all the leaks in the Tom DeLonge groups down here. We could just watch them shake and bake, right, you guys?
Yeah, but that's still an American phenomenon of leaks. Like, there are no leaks in Canada. There are no whistleblowers running around and leak documents, and same in Europe and Australia. The United States of America is the only place that this happens, where you have, Tom DeLonge and all these, Avery, and then they start the aquarium. Dan Smith starts the aquarium. So when it came down, we started the thing with cats. So we all called cats, and I was the putty tat, and there was it was the stray cat, and all the different cats. I mean, they were playing these stupid games, but the United States is the one place. It seems like they control this whole phenomena, but it's always the military is running the show.
Well, and you may have said something right there. You may have said it. Excuse me. Okay,
That's what the mute button's for, Melinda.
Okay, I know. I apologize. Okay, you may have said it right there, that the U.S. controls it, and it could be that it, because of whether it was the biggest military worldwide at the time, or the money was there, or the intelligence, because it started with naval intelligence, that it could have been when there was a worldwide decision to keep the lid on this and to investigate it further and develop the technology and do the crash retrievals, et cetera, that it fell under U.S. jurisdiction. I think there's some history in ufology, to show that. Now, I would need to ask someone else in ufology exactly maybe why that was, but I probably just touched on some of it, whether we had the intelligence apparatus in place or the biggest military, whatever. And we're talking back in like the 30s and 40s when the jurisdiction for management of this either was assumed by the U.S. or handed to the U.S. by the rest of the world.
I am, Melinda, I can tell you right now, it was never handed to the U.S. The U.S. decided they were going to manage it. It's that simple. But
everybody else seemed to go along with it,
Well,
because...
I'm sure everybody else was being threatened by us that they had to go along with it.
Okay. But so my point... Yeah.
But I'm going to say one more thing. I believe that the U.S. also said, if we get anything out of this, we will also give you a small sliver of the pie of technology if we do get anything.
I'm sure there was probably deals made,
Yeah, it's the same way. Same with NATO. I mean, the United States runs NATO. Yeah. It's like everybody reports to them, and you get to, to spin off, and we get to protect you, and this whole operation where it's a convenient way that it's operated. I think the Russians are working independent, and the Chinese are working independent. But for the sort of the free world, the Western world, I think it's basically, you can even see with the case in Bolivia with the aliens, the live aliens, where they come walking in there. And they say we'll allow a Brazilian on the space shuttle, and they walk off with the body, the live aliens and the craft and the whole bit. That there's all these quid pro quo that you can put a lot of pressure on a country and say, we're going to cut off this, we're going to cut off that, and everybody just goes along with it because it's almost like the people. It's easier just to let someone else run the thing rather than doing it yourself. Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say that's what happened. So it fell, whether the U.S. assumed it or it fell upon them, or a combination, but that they have been running it, and everyone else's answers to them about this. It shows too, to some degree, if you kind of step back and you go, well, wait a second, if they've been doing that from the get-go, a lot of this, Cold War with Russia and Cold War with China, and is all just smoke and mirrors, because you realize, well, wait a second, they've been answering to us all along on these bigger subjects, and the rest of that just becomes literally the hand puppets and a play for, so that you'll back military actions with money and, blah, blah, blah. So, and it just helps you realize how it really works, and I'm not saying I agree with any of it. It seems to be just the way it is, though.
Yeah. Well,
I want to ask you something, Grant.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Melinda.
I want to switching subject just a little bit. All of a sudden, it seems like, Doty, Richard or Rick Doty, is out there. And I jokingly say he's not quite singing like a canary, but he is humming like a canary. And so why is he out there humming like a canary? Obviously he's a member of this group, always has been. It seems to be different than you have the whole DeLong ITS and what's going on there. At the same time, you've got the remnants of the Rockefeller Initiative stuff going on. You've certainly got a resurface. I'm hearing Firmage's name come up again, and ISSO or whatever the new incarnation of that's going to be. And so obviously these guys have their hands in a couple different pots at once. But Doty seems like, well, he's saying I'm saying these things on behalf of these guys. He's not saying I'm going against them, but he seems to be kind of like this lone guy out there. And I'm like, I just find it curious who green-lighted Doty to suddenly be yapping about this. And then he's also been saying in recent interviews, well, I've been saying all this stuff all along. Well, no, it's just all of a sudden you're getting a tremendous amount of attention for it. Or if you were saying it on the down low. But, it just seems like suddenly he's out there a bunch and on the increase. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on. I mean, I guess I answered my own question. It's just part of it. And it's part of the soft disclosure. But it's just interesting. It seems like he was definitely green-lighted somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, everybody's talking about Tom DeLonge. There are 6 operations going on at this very present. I was offered an in on one of the operations, and one of them was this operation with this documentary thing in Hollywood with 6 parts, and they were going to do the Avery, and Collins was involved, and they went and interviewed Richard Doty, they went and interviewed Bigelow, they interviewed Firmage, and all these names that I heard that they were interviewing. And so it's one of the disclosures that he's maybe Pandolfi has sort of green-lighted all these different things. He's very close friends with Kit Green, and Kit Green tells this famous story that Doty passed the lie detector test after UFO Cover-Up Live the day after in the counterintelligence. Really? This famous story that this big with the guys that wrote the Roswell report stormed out of the office where Kit Green was saying he had passed this lie detector test, and then Kit Green also tells a story that he had this very secret meeting with Helms. I don't know if you ever heard this story. It's very secret, and he got the code word wrong. He was supposed to give this code word, and that Helms told him, believe everything Richard Doty tells you on UFOs. So this whole thing is Richard Doty the bad guy that everybody sort of made him out to be, or is he a guy that is playing a role? He's always played this role. And when I heard him do that interview, that hour and a half interview with Stephen Greer, and I talked to the producer, Stephen Greer, saying, and they said, oh, we made him confess. And it's like, what? That's not what I heard when I heard him talking. And some of the stuff that Doty was saying in there was stuff that only I knew. This very secret meeting they had in the Midwest before UFO Cover-Up Live, where the producer for UFO Cover-Up Live was so scared he thought he was going to die. He suddenly, all these high-level people, and they're on this lake, and they're this bizarre meeting that takes place in the middle of the night and stuff like that. And Doty's talking about this meeting. I'm going like, wow, this meeting actually did take place. So I start hearing Doty, and I'm thinking he actually sounded a lot better. I fought with him in the 1980s. I thought he was this big counterintelligence, bad guy type thing. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he's actually playing his role. That they brought him back out. Yeah. That they're because to me, it's all been initiated in the last 2 years. There's no doubt in the last 2 years this thing has spiraled unbelievably out of control. And it happened when Barack Obama gave an interview to GQ magazine, and that's when he said the UFO files are not as top secret as you think they are. And when a president talks about something, it's green lighted, it's declassified, and this thing gave it the green light. And there's for me, it's hour to hour. The stuff that is breaking, it's unbelievable. The stuff that's coming out, I've never seen anything like it. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And you have these
It
different
just seems
operations.
like you were saying, something is green lighted and they're moving the ball further down the field. It's not disclosure, but it's some
acclimatization. That's what Bigelow
action.
called it.
Yeah, acclimatization. I totally agree with you on that, Grant. That's perfectly. And it plays right into my whole concept of that it's all a mind control op that they started.
Yeah.
They said, well, let's see how gullible these people are and what they'll believe.
It's all mind control. Everything is mind control.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, commercials and TV and how they spin the news and the idea that we need more and everything is people are totally, sheeples. They're just following along. They're easily manipulated. They don't pay attention. Everybody's busy, trying to make a living. Nobody's watching. Nobody just go along with it. I mean, you see what goes on in the world and you just like, wow.
I know. If you pay attention for 5 minutes a day, you get depressed so long that you can't get out of bed. I swear to God.
But again, the way I look at it, I'll end like this. I look at it. It doesn't matter whether it's all true, whether it's all bad, whether it's all good. It really doesn't matter. It's not what cards you are dealt to you. It's how you play your cards. So whether it turns out all to be really bad stuff, you and I still have to live our lives, and we have to do what we think is right, and that's all we can do. We can't really control what other people are doing because it's all about what cards are dealt to us.
That's true.
One other thing that is curious
Melinda, the show's going to end in 1 minute, so say what you got to say.
Tell us a secret.
Wrap it up.
Tell us some secret.
You guys probably touched upon this before I got on, but the current interest in this group is very much focused also not only on the technology but also on abductees and their genetics, their DNA, and their psi abilities. And I'm not sure, Grant, if you covered that before I got on, but that's a big part of their interest as well.
But I contacted them, and they absolutely will not. I had very high-level people who offered to help. They are not talking. It's leaked out, but they're not talking about it. So,
Yeah. Well, as you two both know, my big theory about this whole thing is it goes back to, I always tell everybody it's all connected and it goes back, and I keep fighting the JFK thing, but I'm telling you guys, that's when they really ramped it up, is when they realized they can kill the President of the United States and cover it up. They knew they had the UFO thing down to a science by then. It's just, there's no way that these guys haven't been in the game for a very long time, and I'm still going to bring this out. I don't like the fact that we still have the dark underbelly of these guys running around hurting people in our community and getting away with it. That bothers me immensely,
Of course. Well,
a
lot of harm has been done to keep these secrets, without a doubt.
Yeah.
All secrets.
And that bothers me.
All secrets.
Exactly. That's right. That's true, Grant. It goes back to every secret that we've ever, since the Egyptians and beyond. People
justify, like the 2,000 civilians killed, or Pandolfi talks about the bombing of Iraq and a couple months ago, 40,000 people killed. He called it genocide. So, I mean, the people are justified. And you get one guy who decides, we got to do this to save the world, and everybody just salutes and goes along with it.
Yeah. It's true.
Well, I think at least we can
Melinda,
start with
on that note,
the lies ending in our community.
Goodnight.
Yep.
Yeah. It's time for us to.
You're getting cut off, Melinda. You're gone.
You're time for us to say goodnight. And thank you all for being with us. And thank you, Melinda and Grant. Thank you as always. And we'll see you next week. And I got something special cooking up for you. I've got a friend, John, is going to be with me, and he's an experiencer. So you guys are going to have lots of fun. So we'll see you next week on the California MUFON Radio Show here on IRN.
Right now, save 50 to 70% off at Banana Republic factory stores and online. And 60% off absolutely everything at Gap factory stores. Save even more with 40% off clearance at Gap factory stores. And at Banana Republic factory, all flannel shirts $19.99 and doorbuster scarves $9.99. This weekend only. Search our store locator for your nearest Gap factory and Banana Republic factory store, or shop us online.